Welcome to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. On this podcast, we journey through the devastating experience of the death of a child. Grief is seldom discussed openly in our culture, and the death of a child makes people feel even more uncomfortable. We approach the topic openly and honestly, speaking to people who have lost loved ones and experts who help care for them. Whether you are a parent experiencing loss or someone who wants to support another going through this tragedy, this podcast strives to offer hope and help.
Welcome to episode number 290 of Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. I'm Marcy Larson, Andy's mom. Today, I am delighted to introduce you to Danielle. Danielle is Lydia's mommy. Now, as you listen, you are going to hear about an organization that Danielle and her family founded, and this is called Love from Lydia. So the website is lovefromlydia.com. And I'm bringing it up right now because I don't know that I emphasized enough when we were talking how important it is for this organization to get volunteers. So what they are wanting to do is they are wanting to match families with other bereaved parents who maybe been in a very similar situation, that their children died in similar ways or at similar ages. And in order to be able to match families like that, you need a lot of volunteers. You need a really big group of volunteers. So I know I'm filling out some paperwork for this. You just fill out a little intake form on that website. Again, lovefromlydia.com. And then they can match you to be able to help out families in those first days and weeks after the death of their child, because I know they would like to be in more hospitals than they are. Right now it's just 2. But if they can expand that, that would be great. But they can only do that with more and more volunteers. So keep that in mind as you listen. And if you feel called, go to their website and sign up. I just want to give another reminder to follow me on social media. So again, on Instagram and Facebook, I am always Andy's mom. So look for me there. Right now, just sit back and enjoy listening to Danielle, Lydia's mommy. Thank you so much, Danielle, for agreeing to come on the Always Andy's Mom podcast today.
Hi, thank you, Marcy, for having me.
I'm really looking forward to talking to you today.
Me too. I'm very excited. I don't ever pass up an opportunity to talk about Lydia, so I'm ready.
Yes, because you've been on a couple podcasts already, you said.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Well, and what's funny, this is a funny story. It's just a terrible story. So in some ways for me, because you wrote to me in November, right around Thanksgiving, and I didn't write you back. I just didn't. I did not. I don't know how I didn't write you back, because I was writing a lot of people back. I was trying to do a lot of things before I left on vacation for a week with my husband, and then my kids were coming home for Christmas. And so I was going to take off about 6 weeks. So I was trying to get everything all wrapped up, and somehow you fell through the cracks and I missed it. So if I do that to somebody else, please email me back, because I don't mean to miss anyone, and I really felt terrible about it. So what happened was I had another mom that wrote to me around that same time, and I wrote to her and she said, I'm not ready to go on the podcast now, but email me in February. And I said, okay. So I wrote a note to myself to email her in February. I'm looking back to find her, to email her in February, and she's going to be on the podcast here in a couple weeks. It's Scarlett's mom. Anyway, I find your email about Lydia, and I just was like, oh my word, I cannot believe I missed this. So I was kicking myself. I wrote to you. You were very gracious in your response. And in some ways, it's kind of funny, because you told me that at the time you had only listened to 1 or 2 episodes. So I'm going to have you explain that to the audience a little bit.
Sure. So I actually, it's funny that you say, I emailed you over Thanksgiving. It was I think it was on Thanksgiving that I probably emailed you, because
Yeah.
I kind of went through, holidays are hard, and holidays are especially hard for us because we lost her on a holiday.
Right.
So on Thanksgiving, I didn't want to think about the holiday. So instead, I was just doing business work. So
Yes.
I was doing things for Love from Lydia, which is the nonprofit organization that I started in her memory after she died. And I tend to go through these bits of focus when it comes to like when I'm having a really rough day, I like throw myself into working on Love from Lydia stuff. And like that's how I feel connected to her. And that's how I kind of cope with the harder times. So that's when you got my email.
Right. Which, in my defense, I was up north at the cottage, so that's probably why. I probably looked at it, and then it got checked off that I had seen it, and then whatever. But
Right. So I had listened to, and I don't even know how I found your podcast. I don't know if I was like looking, like searching something specific about grief or whatever, but I've always listened to podcasts. I love podcasts. So I listened to 1 or 2 episodes and I was like, I need to email her. I love her podcast. It's just so conversational. It just feels so natural. And whichever one I listened to first, and I don't even remember which one I listened to first because I've since listened to many of them.
right.
But I was like, I feel like this person is speaking from me. Like I just feel like you were saying things that I feel. The guest was feeling everything that I feel. So it was just so relatable and I needed to reach out.
Right. And then now, I mean, since when I emailed you back after I emailed Scarlett's mom, when I kind of panicked, emailed you back, you were like, oh, I've listened to so many more now. Now I feel like I know it even so much better. So, maybe it's for the best.
Yeah. So it worked out.
You know how things roll a lot better now than you did before, but still, I apologize to you for sure.
It's okay. Please, no apologies.
Well, let's just hear all about your Lydia, because I'm excited to hear about your Lydia.
Sure. So I'm actually sitting in her room right now.
Oh, I love that, because I'm in Andy's room.
I know you do yours from Andy's room.
Yes.
So I wanted to do the same. And this is actually the first time that I'm going to be in her room since she died for an extended period of time.
Really?
I felt like this was appropriate, like a good time to actually make that happen because I've been very scared of her room, which, I'll go into later on when I talk about her passing. But Lydia was amazing. She was absolutely perfect. It took us a little bit of time to get pregnant with her.
Mm-hmm.
We needed to go through some fertility measures.
And first baby for you.
Yes, it was first baby. And she was just amazing from the start. I just felt so connected to her. She was just so smart. Like she reached all of her milestones really quickly. She was just a bundle of energy. She was just so happy all the time. Like her daycare teachers loved her. They said she was just so easy during the day. Like she was just wonderful. Actually, something that comes to mind is at her wake, there was this person online. And like my husband and I were standing in front of the room as most families do, and there was a long line out the door of people. And of course we knew most of the people there, but then there was this man that was there and neither of us recognized him. And I was like, do you know who that is? My husband's like, no, like he looks kind of familiar, but I'm not sure. And he came up to us and he just hugged us and he was sobbing. And I was like, I'm like trying to place where I know this man from because he looked familiar. Right. Like we've seen each other in passing. And then he just goes like, he says, my daughter was in Lydia's class. So Lydia was 21 months when she passed away. But he's like, my daughter was in Lydia's class. And there's a story that I want to share with you that just comes to mind when I think of Lydia. And he said that he was coming to pick up his daughter one day. And you know how a lot of the daycares have like a glass where you can kind of look in. And I like to say like, see the kids in the wild before like they see you. And then they were like, oh, mommy, daddy, and like run up to you. But he went over and he looked in the room and he saw his daughter and she was crying. She was crying in the corner. And he said that Lydia went over, she picked up a doll and she walked over to this girl and she just gave her the doll. And I don't know if he said like she patted her on the back or something, but
wow.
He was just like, it was just such a sweet moment and such a unique situation for someone of her age.
Wow. Yes.
Like she had this level of empathy and kindness that not many kids her age experience, like that you see. So she was just so special. She was amazing.
I can tell you that's so unusual because obviously I'm a pediatrician, right? And we do talk about when kids are at that age, that 18 months to 2-year age, they really only do parallel play. Like they play next to someone. They don't play with someone because they can't really ever put themselves in someone else's shoes like that. And she's in that age group where you would not expect her to put herself, because that's what you have to do in that kind of thing. You have to be thinking about, like, she's sad, and doing something to make her happy. So that is very unusual.
Yeah.
What a caring kid you have.
Yeah. Yeah. Lydia was great. Yeah.
Yeah.
She was my entire world, like she was our
Yeah.
only child. So
Yeah.
all of our energy went into being around Lydia. And I did all the classes with her that I could. She was born
Yeah.
in 2021. So it was, COVID was going on and everything. And I was super anxious about taking her out in the world. But I did what I could. Like I would do classes that were outside with her. And
Yeah.
so although she did things, not many people still were able to meet her. Like there are a lot of family members that we have that never got to meet her.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
that's too bad. Yeah. Well, anyway, she was a fun little girl too, right?
Yep.
Do you have fun stories about her?
Of
About her
course.
little personality?
Yeah, I mean, she loved going to the playground. She would always say, like when she wanted to go to the playground, she would say, "Big slide," because we had one of those little tyke slides in our backyard, but like that wasn't cutting it. She wanted to go on the big slide. One of my favorite days with her was I live in New Jersey and like right in a beach town. It's funny because I don't go to the beach during the summer, but I go to what we call local summer, so which is like September to May.
Okay.
And that's when, the crowds aren't there and it's really nice. And that's my favorite time of year, specifically in September. So in September, I took her to the beach for the first time, the September right before she died. So she was about 18 months then.
Yeah.
We just had the best day. I mean, she was just in the sand. I had this video, which this is the video that I'm going to send you because it's always the video that comes to mind. I was holding her hand and we put our feet in the water. Like we were waiting for the wave to come up and like go over our feet. And so it was the first time she experienced feeling the water and I got it on video. And she just like has this, like her mouth is wide open, her eyes are wide open, and you could just see this pure joy, like her experiencing like the waves crashing on her for the first time. And it was just
Oh,
such
I
a
love
beautiful
that.
moment. And I'm so happy that I got it on camera because it's one of my favorite videos.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. I love that. That's awesome. Well, do you want to talk now a little bit about what happened to Lydia? Because it was just such a shock. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Lydia was pretty healthy. The only thing that was just, I guess, a little different was that she was born with an umbilical hernia that never went away. I mean, it was a significant one that went out like
Uh-huh.
maybe
Yeah.
2 inches from her stomach.
Yeah.
It was very large, but we were seeing doctors about it.
Yeah.
One day it did get stuck
Okay.
and we took her to the emergency room. They did ultrasounds and x-rays and everything. And it had resolved itself on its own, like as we were going to the hospital. So they were like, there's nothing imminent right now, but we would recommend that she get hernia repair surgery soon because if it got stuck once, it could get stuck again.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
I mean, usually we kind of do those 2-3 years old.
Exactly.
So, but if you had gotten one stuck, I would say you probably would go closer to 2 than 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So she wound up getting that surgery when she was 17 months. And
Mhm.
it was fine, no complications or anything like that. So that was really the only like medical issue she had.
Yeah.
Otherwise, she was completely healthy. She was healthy, happy. I can't stress that enough. So Christmas Eve of 2022,
Mhm.
woke up feeling, she was like kind of sniffly, but she was at daycare. So, we figured it's
Yeah.
just a bug. Daycare kids are always
Yeah. The daycare crud. Yeah.
right.
Right.
And she was just like, she was pretty fine except for this like sniffly. And I was like, okay. We had a beautiful day. We had a beautiful evening. My mom came over. My dad had actually passed away exactly 3 months before Lydia. So this was
Oh,
the
wow.
first like major holiday that my mom came out for.
So she was there at your house?
She was there and she
Mhm.
actually wasn't going to come. She was like considering not coming because she was just like really upset about my dad passing away. And Christmas
Sure.
Eve is a really big holiday in my family. We're Italian. We do the 7 fishes. Like it's a big tradition for us.
Mhm.
So I encouraged her to come. in hindsight, I'm really glad that she came because we had people with us, the day before. So my mom was there, my in-laws were there, and we just had a great day. I mean, we ate together. We watched her open some presents on Christmas Eve, the ones that were from my in-laws and my mom. She was happy.
Yeah.
I very specifically remember this one memory of, it was time for her to go to bed, but everyone was still here. And I remember her walking up the stairs with me and just waving to everyone from the stairs and saying, bye bye, bye bye. And she went up to her room. She went to sleep. In the morning, she was just very lethargic. All night, she just wasn't sleeping well. And I think at one point I had brought her into my bed. That's what she would say. She would say big bed when she wanted to be in my bed. So she comes in my bed and I didn't really sleep well that night. She didn't really sleep well. I wake up in the morning and she's just very lethargic. She didn't want to eat, which is very, very rare for her. I mean,
Mhm.
she would eat constantly. She always said she would pull our hands and to bring us to the pantry, and she would always say snack, and she would say it with this cute little accent. Would say snack, and we would get a snack for her. And then I would always joke with my husband about this, that she used to manipulate him a little bit. He had these little individual packages of cookies, and she would grab one and she would walk over to him and she would go, share a cookie with daddy? As if he wanted the cookies and she was going to share it with him because she wanted to do that for him. Um, so she had great
That's
vocabulary
awesome.
for 21.
That is awesome. Yeah, for sure.
So she wakes up Christmas Day, she's lethargic, just she wasn't herself.
Yeah.
And I wound up, my husband and I talked about you know what, let's postpone opening presents on Christmas. We'll do it we'll have her go for a nap because she doesn't really feel well. She threw up a few times, but she was only throwing up water. We were trying to give her water and she was just throwing up water. And she just seemed very lethargic. So we're maybe she just needs to sleep it off.
Yeah. Do you think yesterday was a big day,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
She had a slight fever. It was maybe 99. It wasn't anything concerning. So I put her down for a nap, and then I was just so exhausted because I hadn't slept well the night before since she was not sleeping well. So I took a nap too. And I woke up and it was maybe 2.5 hours later. And I was she never sleeps this long. This is kind of strange. So I remember my husband was doing something in another part of the house. So I texted him that I was going to get some water for her just to make sure she wasn't dehydrated.
Right.
And I was going to wake her up. And, I went to her crib and I actually remember I opened the door and I remember standing at her crib and just looking at her. And she was sleeping in the same position that she typically slept, on her stomach with her butt in the air and with her head toward the side. And she just looked like normal.
Yeah.
And I just remember looking at her and thinking, she looks so peaceful and beautiful right now. And then I started rubbing her back and just saying her name really quietly to try to wake her up. Then she wasn't waking up and I started getting a little nervous. So then I kind of shook her a little more forcefully. She still wasn't responding to me. So at that point, I screamed for my husband and he came running up the stairs. He grabbed her from her crib and she was limp in his arms. So immediately we knew something was very wrong.
Yeah.
So he put her down. I did CPR. I called 911. I did CPR until the paramedics could get here. They used the defibrillator on her. They, they tried everything. They rushed her to the hospital. The hospital did everything they could. They were working very hard. It was clear. She just never regained signs of life. But I remember when we called 911, I was in complete denial that she had died. I was just oh, well, the paramedics are going to come and they're going to save her and she's going to be fine. She just needs help.
Yeah.
Because I remember running out of the house and yelling to my husband, make sure you take my car, because he had taken her car seat out of his car to clean it. So I'm the car seat's in my car. So when you go to the hospital, when you meet me at the hospital, make sure you take my car. And and her insurance card is in my wallet. And I was telling him all these things because I wasn't thinking, we're not going to come back with her. Of course she's coming back with us. She just needs, something is wrong and someone's going to help her and she's going to be okay. So I was in complete denial. And then obviously we get to the hospital and that's when it hit me that things were much worse than I
Yeah.
thought they were.
I mean, I think that's that way for many, many people, right? I feel like my husband even, we're in the car accident and he's the one doing CPR, and he has said to me so many times, all I kept thinking was, I just need to get an IV. If I can just get IV and if I can get him fluids, he'll be okay. I just need to get him fluids. Like things go
Right.
through your head that you think that you just don't. I mean, he did not think Andy was dead. And obviously he was, but there was not a part of him that didn't think he would be able to be saved. And that's like you. And and he's a physician and he saw him and he saw what was happening with him and he still didn't believe it. So I don't think there's any fault for you not believing it, Yeah. It's just impossible, I think, to wrap your head around.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's the last thing from our minds. I think my
Yeah.
husband realized the severity of it because, I mean, he was in a much different state than I was. And I mean, when the police came in, I was just like, can someone help her? Just help her. Just help her. Like, and he was just like in his own space,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because I think he realized.
So you rode in the ambulance with her?
I wasn't allowed to ride in the ambulance because they were using the defibrillator.
Right.
So
Okay.
they had a police officer drive me, which actually is a whole nother story. I wound up actually 6 months after she died, reaching out to the chief of police in our town to kind of debrief about what had happened and just some of the decisions that were made that day that kind of contributed to our trauma.
Uh-huh.
So, like, they put me in the back of a police car to transport me, which, that's like a typical thing. You wouldn't have a civilian ride in the front seat with you. But I mean, I already felt like something happened to my child. I couldn't protect her. Now I'm sitting in the back of a police car, so I must be bad. And like I
Yes.
did something wrong. And,
Right.
when your child
Because you're
dies,
already feeling like a horrible mother anyway, right?
exactly.
We
Right.
all
Like,
do. We all feel that way.
because we didn't know, we had no idea why she died because she was fine. I mean, aside from just feeling under the weather, there was nothing so significant that would have warranted, like, this is an emergency. She
Right.
just wasn't feeling herself. I was very panicked. And then also, like, my husband wasn't with us in the hospital for quite a while because they held him back to ask him questions. And there was just a lot that happened that day. So, when they called time of death, I was there by myself in the room with her. And
Oh, wow. Yeah. That was not handled well.
I remember just laying in bed with her body. And that was, I was alone. And I wish that didn't happen. I wish that my husband was there, that we could be together.
Right.
But we weren't.
Yeah.
So, the police chief was very receptive when I reached out to him. We had an in-person meeting. We talked about it, and he took full responsibility for some of the choices that were made. And I don't think any of them were made in malice. I think it really was
No.
like the trauma-informed training wasn't there.
I mean, that happens. It happens in hospitals too, that
Yeah.
people do really, because there isn't good training for that at all. There isn't. That's why Eric and I kind of do that now to try to help people do better.
Yeah.
Because when you're not taught, because no one wants to think about this happening,
Right.
then you don't do the right things. You don't make the right choices in those moments if you've never ever even discussed it. And that's sad, but it's the way it is.
Yeah. So we later found out from the autopsy, we found out pretty quickly, which, I hate saying that we're fortunate in any of this because
Yeah.
no one's fortunate when their child dies. But, I know parents who still don't have answers as to why their child
Yes.
died. So, I feel fortunate in the sense that we were able to find out right away from the medical examiner what had happened. So they said that she was born, she had a congenital mesenteric defect, which led to a volvulus, and that's how she died.
So to explain that a little bit, the mesentery, there you've got this, it's kind of this membranous tissue that sort of holds all the small intestines kind of together. And so if that is has a defect in it, a volvulus, that means that your intestine can get twisted up on itself or on something. And when it's twisted, then it can't go through. And so you have this blockage. And obviously that is really, really terrible. So it was that mesenteric defect that I'm sure led to something getting twisted around how it shouldn't be and having that happen. And probably why she was just not wanting to eat.
Exactly.
But it can turn into an emergency really quickly without you really realizing that it was an emergency yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we talked to different medical professionals in her care, and even medical professionals that didn't know her. And they all said, like, based on what I was telling them, they wouldn't have brought their kid to the ER if they saw those signs. And they said it's like a silent killer because it's not something that has obvious signs of it occurring.
Right. And you would never, ever know ahead of time before it just happened. You'd never be able to tell that it's kind of, but when you're born like that, it is just sort of waiting to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it could happen at any moment or it could never happen. You just don't know.
Yeah. The medical examiner described it as a ticking time bomb.
Right.
That, it's just there. And it's so, even though they did the x-rays and the ultrasounds, they still couldn't see it because the only way they would have been able to see it, so has been described to me, is if they did one of those GI track with like the dye and could watch where everything was going through to make sure that nothing was stuck. So that's what happened. It was very sudden. It was, very unexpected. It happened on Christmas Day. So that brings in a whole other level of grief.
Yes, for sure. And a whole other level of trauma.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Because as you said, holidays just aren't the same then.
Right.
When you've had something so horrific happen on a holiday.
Yeah.
Holidays are hard anyway after you lose a child. But that adds even more complication to it for sure. So talk about your grief journey and what that was like. Because obviously, you lose your only child and she's sort of your world at that point.
Yeah. I mean, I felt in the beginning like my identity was just ripped away from me because I was Lydia's mommy, right? Like she was my only child and we had wanted her so badly and I spent every moment I could with her. So not having that identity, even though of course I'm always going to be Lydia's mom, but not being able to parent a living child and that just being ripped away from me without any warning is just, my body couldn't comprehend it. I wasn't prepared for the physical pain that grief had.
Yes.
I didn't realize, people always say like a broken heart, but I really did not expect to be physically in pain after she had died. I mean, that was, I think, when I think back to the immediate aftermath, like that's what really stands out to me. But, my husband and I, we really didn't know anyone who had lost a child. Of course, we know people who had miscarriages because they can be so common. We know people who maybe lost an older child, but we knew no one who had lost an infant or a toddler.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, I just wish I had someone to be able to talk to about this because I wanted to ask questions like how do I go on? How do I continue?
Yes.
Because like now I don't even know who I am as a person.
Right.
I'm a social worker. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So the way my brain works is to fix, right? And to help and to do that. So
I'm a pediatrician. We got the same brain, right?
So, I wanted to do something. I didn't know what to do because also like she didn't have a disease. She didn't have like anything that I could kind of be like, all right, I'm going to raise money for this research. Like there wasn't really anything that I could connect her to. Unless you know of something else. But I mean, it's a congenital defect. There's no way of knowing. There's no way of, this is not a test that they're going to do on infants. It would be like malpractice probably if you were to put an infant through these tests for no observable reason, right? So I wanted to do something in her memory or to like keep working for her. So in May, so just 5 months after, I started a nonprofit, a 501(c)(3. We got our letter then in her memory called Love from Lydia. And I just felt compelled to do something. And in the beginning, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to do something in her memory. So it originally started just in my experience of being in the hospital and the lack of support that we received. And, we weren't given anything. We weren't given any resources when we left the hospital. Like the only thing we left with was the clothes that she was wearing. And those clothes were the same clothes that I was wearing because we were wearing matching pajamas. And it was just like, I just remember holding these clothes, like these miniature versions of what I'm wearing. Just like, I'm still in shock at that moment. But no resources, no follow up.
No.
Someone followed up with us weeks later just to say, like, oh, I think you fell through the cracks. Like, I'm so sorry about that. Do you need anything? And I'm like, well, I don't need anything now. I could have used something maybe earlier on. So I really didn't want that to happen to anyone else. So originally, Love from Lydia started by me wanting to help hospitals and other programs strengthen their resources that they give lost parents immediately after a child dies. So I created these packets with a letter from a grieving parent to another grieving parent, just so people know that they're not alone. I always offered my contact information if anyone ever wanted to call me and talk. I also included a list of resources that were both like therapeutic resources and also financial resources to different nonprofit organizations or in New Jersey and also around the country that could help out if a family did it for unexpected costs or anything like that. And then I included these 2 little crocheted hearts, so kind of going back to explain the hearts, I've always enjoyed crocheting, but after Lydia died, I didn't really know what to do, like from between when she died and when the wake was. Like I had this nervous energy. I was either like curled up in bed or I was just pacing. Like I didn't really know what to do with my energy. So I just started crocheting, and I started crocheting these little white hearts that take me like 2 minutes to make a heart. And I don't know why started making them, and I wanted them to be white, and I just started making them just to keep myself busy. And then at her wake, I put one in her hand. So she was holding one. She's buried holding one in her hand. And then I have one because I felt like that was a way for us to connect her to like her body to like this world still. And then I started giving out the hearts to people that I knew, or maybe that came to the wake or that were connected to her in some way. And then I just started giving hearts to random people. I started attaching them to cards that like little like random act of kindness. And after that, I decided like I would give lost parents pairs of these hearts, and they could do whatever they want with them. But I kind of like briefly told the story about like how that was helpful to me and like connecting the 2 of us. That kind of happened for a little bit. I was partnering with a couple of hospitals to add those resources to their list of resources, or like their box of resources that they typically give lost parents after a child died. And then more recently, so in the past year or so, like 10 months to a year, I started working on a different program called COPE, which stands for Connecting Our Personal Experiences. And that really came out of my grief journey of what has helped me the most, which was connecting with other lost parents. So, although I wasn't able to connect initially, a couple months out, I joined a couple of groups. I started talking to more people. Other people connected me to other people who they knew who had lost children. That to me was the most helpful of all. Like I'm a therapist myself, and that was better for me than therapy. And I don't want to advertise that because I don't want people to think that therapy is not great, because it is great, and I still go to therapy. But I needed someone who could really connect with me and understand from this terribly unique, profound experience. So I created COPE, which it's basically like a peer mentorship program where it's lost parents connected with other lost parents who are further out in their grief. And I know plenty of organizations have things like this. However, my intention for COPE is to really get to parents in the immediate aftermath of their child's death. So connecting them right after so that they have a point person if they want to. They don't have to reach out to them, but saying like, this is a resource that's there. If you want to talk to a lost parent right now, we can connect you. Because that's something that I found I think would be very helpful to me. And in the other lost parents that I talk to on a daily basis, they also agreed with me that that would be a great resource to have.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they can help with even just like what to expect in the next few days. So, what to expect in planning a funeral or planning a service or, experience on maybe ways that they honor their child at those services, preparing them for what questions they might be asked and what to maybe think about ahead of time. So, like when my husband and I went to the funeral home, even though I've been to a bunch of funerals in my life, like, I grew up where my mom would bring me to wakes and funerals that of people we didn't really even know, because it was like, well, we have to be there to support this person and we love them. So, their great aunt died and we have to go to their wake. And I'm like, but I don't even know them. Why do I have to go? So I've been to so many wakes and funerals. I knew what to expect, but going in as a lost parent, I was completely in over my head.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't prepared for one of the first questions to be, do you want to bury or cremate your child?
Yeah.
Of course that's a question that you would be asked, but I just wasn't prepared for that.
Well, I think too, even when you're at the hospital right away, like, well, which funeral home do you want to use? Like,
Right.
heck if I know. I don't know. And then that question, and then when we decided to bury Andy, well, what cemetery? I don't know. I mean, these are all things that you just have no idea about.
Right.
You haven't even thought about it. Certainly you think about it if you're older, right? I think like Eric's parents have been trying to figure out where they're going to be buried and all that stuff now because they're getting to be older. You have those conversations. You don't have those conversations about your toddler or your
Exactly.
14-year-old. You just
Right.
don't.
Yeah.
And even when you're a young parent, I mean, Eric and I weren't having conversations about each other, let alone our kids, right? So it's just, I think those resources are so precious. I mean, for me, what ended up, we found our funeral home because, I'm a pediatrician. So obviously we have had kids in our practice die. And we have one of our nurses is a complex care coordinator nurse. And she, of course, everybody in my office knew right away. And I talked to her and she said the name of a funeral home. And she said, they're really good with kids. I know they do a really good job with kids. So, I mean, those are the types of things you need somebody that says they do a really good job with kids, because not everybody probably does a really good job with kids.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to say, the funeral home that we chose, and we just chose the one that we passed on the way home. It's just,
right.
I didn't want to, what am I going to do? Interview funeral homes right now? Like, I don't know. So I have to say, like, they were wonderful. They were so kind and so compassionate. But even despite how wonderful they were, I still wasn't prepared walking in what I would have to do or say or, decide. So it's hard. So I really felt like it was important to connect families with someone who could guide them, especially in those early days.
Mm-hmm. And there are other weird logistical things like Social Security and all that kind of stuff that you don't think about, getting death certificates, all that stuff that you never, ever in a million years thought you were going to have to deal with.
Yeah.
You have to suddenly deal with.
Right.
Yeah. Just so hard. So it is helpful if you can have someone to be able to help you with some of those kinds of things, for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we're always looking for volunteers.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be just New Jersey, it's around the country. So I know there's a lot of really wonderful people that listen to your podcast. So if anyone is listening and wants a way to help other lost parents, a way to give back, I'd love to talk to you, tell you.
And I don't know. I know you've listened to lots of my episodes now. Did you listen to one where Everly's mom and dad were on? Because they started an organization called Just Enduring with another couple.
So I didn't listen to theirs, but I am familiar with Just Enduring.
You're familiar with them. So they've been on. Both of those couples have been on.
Yeah. I looked into their website. Yeah.
They write to me not I mean, not super frequently, but not crazy infrequently either, because they have very much the same goal. They're based out of St. Louis, so I think it's kind of cool that we've got now one on the East Coast and one right in the middle of the country, and that's their goals are very, very similar to yours in trying to help with resources right away and trying to do education for medical organizations and things too. And so she will write to me. I'll just get a random email saying, I just had somebody write to me. They lost their 4-year-old in their sleep. What do you have any thoughts? And I will immediately send off like 3 names and, send them to email those people first. Say, I would like to give your name to this woman. And they're usually, most people are more than happy to,
Yep.
and do that. So those are the kinds of things that I think can be really helpful. So, for you guys to get in contact with each other would be great. For you to email me would be great. I mean, these are things I think the more people that know about this that can be able to help connect, the better.
Yeah.
Right? Because that is when Marcia emails me, she doesn't want to wait 3 months until somebody else comes. She wants to have somebody to be able to talk to them tomorrow.
Right.
Right? Because they're in pain today and you just don't want to just wait weeks to try to find a good match. So that's why the more organizations we can get like yours and like Just Enduring, and then to be able to really see if we can get more of a net to cover even more people, how great would that be?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because it's such a unique community, right? Like,
Yes.
my heart just breaks every time I hear of a child dying. And, now my thoughts are different than they were. You would hear in the news about a horrible tragedy that happened with a child, and you would stop and be like, wow, that sucks. Like, I can't even imagine what that must be like. Now, experiencing the loss of my own child, I look at every single one of those cases so differently, and my heart breaks.
Yep. Yep. I mean, just over a year ago, there was a shooting here near us on Michigan State University campus. And like the whole day, all I kept thinking was about those poor families and how it was their worst day ever. And, other people are talking about other things. And all I keep thinking about is they just had their worst day and tomorrow's not going to be very much better. It's just like, it just affects you differently. Your heart just goes out in a way that it can't otherwise. You just think differently now.
That's for sure.
Yeah, it's funny that how that is, but it is this.
I mean, my thoughts have changed so much throughout the past 2 years.
Yeah, talk about that.
From where, you think about in the beginning, like I remember, and I'm almost embarrassed to admit this, but now, after speaking to so many lost parents, like I know it was normal.
Yeah.
So when she first died, I remember thinking like, well, I wish she didn't even exist, because if she didn't exist, then I wouldn't be feeling this pain.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was like in the next, like probably in the week to 2 weeks right after she died. Like, why did this happen to me? We all ask, why did this happen? What did I do to deserve this? Like, those are the questions that we're all always asked. Like, I consider myself a pretty good person. Like, I always have people's best interest at heart. Like, I like to help people. Like, why would this happen to me? And as I continued in my grief journey, I started feeling so guilty that was my initial thought, that like I was only caring about me and my feelings. And after the shock wore off and I was able to process more appropriately and more rationally, I realized like, oh my gosh, I can't even believe I thought about that in the first place, because I am so grateful for the time that I had spent with Lydia. Like I now think of the lost parents that I've met along my journey who didn't get any time with their children, or only got a few hours, or only got a few days or weeks or months. And like, I got 21 months with her, and we had a joyful 21 months.
Mm-hmm.
And now looking back, I would 100% do that again, even if I knew that she was going to die at 21 months.
I think that's very, very normal. And I've talked to other parents too, especially when it's their first child that they lose. You almost, when you have another child, there can be almost an instinct of maybe I just shouldn't love him as hard as I did that first one, because I mean, I don't think I could go through that much pain again. So you almost feel like you want to hold a little bit back. Like you don't want to put it all in like you did, which of course isn't right and it's not going to work. But I think it can go through your head and it can be really a normal process, because your mind wants to protect you from pain. You do this all the time. This is why you burn yourself on the stove 15 times, right? You burn yourself once and then you're extra careful so that it doesn't happen again. So I think when you have a huge loss like that, you can get in your mind like, okay, I should protect myself a little bit. Maybe don't love quite so deep. Don't love quite so hard.
What I said to you before, where, when I listen to your podcast, I feel like you're speaking the words from my brain. Like this is an example of one of them. I wound up having my second child back in May of 2024. So, she's just 9 months right now at the time of this recording. And all those thoughts went through my head.
Yeah.
Silly thoughts go through my head too. Like I remember when we were naming her, I was so adamant with Lydia. I needed to name her Lydia. I loved that name. And I thought, well, I fought so hard to make that her name. Maybe that's why she died. Like, all these bizarre thoughts. So this time around, I told my husband, I'm like, I don't care. You want to name her this? We'll name her that. You get a chance now and maybe like you'll be more successful. Like I know because I named her Lydia, that's not why she died. But this is another thing that really like stuck with me from your podcast is like when you interviewed David Kessler, who I absolutely love. And I've listened to his podcast and his books, and I'm really hoping to do his training for certified, like the training, the educator one. Like when he talks about guilt and like how it's so much easier for us to understand, like, I caused some aspect of this, then I have no control over this, and this could possibly happen again. Like I think about it all the time, and that's so
I've thought about it all the time too.
Yeah.
So much easier to accept that guilt than to accept that you were powerless.
Yeah. And now I have my second child, and I love her so much, but there are so many things I won't say. Like I will never say that she's perfect, because I would always say that Lydia was perfect. And I was like, somehow, for some reason, that word perfect has such a different meaning to me now. Like, because I called her perfect and because I loved her so much, is that why she died? Like, I took for granted everything I had for her, with her. So, these bizarre thoughts go through your head, but they're so normal for grieving parents. I mean, now I'm so grateful that I have my second child. Like she has been so healing in this grief journey, and I'm so thankful for her. And, I parent very differently now because I know what you can lose, right? Just the process of being pregnant, and, like you're not naive anymore. You know all the horror stories of pregnancy and
because you've lived it.
Early loss. Yeah. And so, and another thing that I've been thinking about recently is that, like, when Lydia first died, I was so devastated that I didn't have any living children to focus on and to be with. And because I just felt like I had all this love for her in my heart. And then, like, where do I put all this love now? Like, I don't know what to do with it because she's not here. So, like, I need to put it somewhere, and I don't have any living children to do that with. Like, what do I do? And I think about it now and have seen so many lost parents who I am so close with now, and watched them go through the process of parenting while grieving. And, I'm sure you can relate to this very much, right? And just like how hard it was for them, that they had to kind of balance this line of grieving, but also taking care of someone else. And now I kind of think of myself as grateful that I didn't have any living children at that time, because I was able to focus on myself and grieve the way that I needed to grieve at that time.
Yeah. I mean, there are kind of blessings both ways, right?
It is. Absolutely. Like I'm sure I my life would be very different if I had living children at the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now looking back at everything, all I can say is how grateful I am for my daughter now. And we went through IVF with my daughter. We did every test in the book. We're still doing every test in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, we decided to use the same pediatrician that we had with Lydia, who I absolutely love. And, I just felt like she really understands us, and she's
Yeah.
just really grateful
Yeah.
that she exists. And, she is just so focused on making sure that all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted, because it's personal for her now because she knew Lydia.
Yeah.
So our daughter now was born with a couple of defects. Like she was born with a club foot. She was born with hemangiomas and multiple ones. So we wanted to just make sure that we were looking at everything genetically and just in case, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. For sure.
So she's referred us out to the children's specialty hospitals and everything. And we've been working with them, who have been absolutely amazing in this whole process. Recently, we decided to talk to genetics in this hospital. And I mean, it took a very long time to get an appointment because it's such a rare, a specific specialty. And they did all this testing for her. It still hasn't come back, but using Lydia's autopsy report and then doing the blood work from us and for her and everything. And then recently, this is why I'm bringing this all up, is that when Lydia was born, we did the cord blood registry.
Oh.
We banked her cord blood and everything. And for the past 2 years, I've been paying, I don't know, however much money it is. It's probably over $1,000 a year that I'm paying to keep it stored, because I don't know what else to do with it. I can't imagine the idea of destroying it. This is a piece of Lydia. She exists in this little, I don't know, in this test tube somewhere. A part of her is still here, and I can't even imagine getting rid of it. So I explored with them the options of, donating to science and doing different things. And eventually I wound up talking to someone at the hospital that we've been working with for my other daughter with the genetics team. And I was like, can they use it? Would that be helpful in this whole process of looking at the genetics of my living child? And they can. So now I feel like this is Lydia's way of helping.
Yes. Helping her sister. Yeah.
She's connected with her sister and she's helping her sister, and maybe we can get some answers. Maybe, maybe it will do nothing. I don't know. But this is a gesture that Lydia can do.
I love that.
And it's just so special because when Lydia died, we didn't have the opportunity to donate her organs. And that is something that really stuck with me for a long time, because I just felt like I wish that we could help someone else. And knowing this kind person that Lydia was in her little tiny body, and she just, had this empathy like I described earlier, she would have wanted to do that. She would have wanted to help someone else if she could. So the fact that we weren't able to donate anything really has affected me so much. And I now think of this experience of donating her cord blood to this genetics team to help her sister. Maybe that's why we have kept it for so long. Maybe that's why it's here.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I wanted to go back and touch on something you had talked earlier about names and guilt and those types of things too. Because Andrew is Andrew Lee, and he's Andrew Lee because my husband is Eric Lee and his dad is Gerald Lee. And so it was a very important thing for him to have his son be, something Lee Larson. And what's funny in my family, we have the middle name Thomas, is everybody in my family, my dad, my brother, my grandpa, my cousins, everybody. And if my last name was Peterson. And so I had wanted to have a Peter Thomas, which is what my Peter is. He's Peter Thomas. But Eric was so set on having a son with a middle name Lee. And so I had thought Peter Lee sounded like an adverb. I was like, Peter Lee sounds terrible. That is just a horrible name. So we went with Andrew Lee because I thought Andrew Lee did not sound like an adverb. Basically, it sounded like a much better name. So So we went with Andrew Lee Larson, and then we had Peter Lee, and I feel this weird guilt because like Eric didn't get his name to go on, and I did. So it's funny how you have weird things like that, like those weird, stupid guilt things. And that's one that sticks with me. So you're like that with Lydia, like, oh, I got my name. And then you lost her. And then like, I don't even want to do my name now. Right. Yeah. It's just, so anyway, it just reminded me very much of that. And that's something that I've done this podcast for 6 years and I've never admitted that. I've never told Eric that I feel guilty that my family's name lives on and his doesn't. So if he listens to this, which he sometimes listens and sometimes doesn't, he'll probably hear it for the first time this clearly still bothers me. But isn't that funny? Because you have, I don't know, it's just the way it is.
Thank you for sharing that with me. No, especially you haven't shared it yet, right? And I think
I know I've never shared it.
That's so telling too. Like
all these years, I've never shared that with anyone.
You've done this podcast for 6 years, and that's not something that has come up, but it's something that sticks in your head. Like there are things every day that I'm surprised about that will pop up in my head, and I'm like, this has actually been gnawing away at me for years. And
right. I mean,
I'm just saying it.
Really crying. Yeah. I'm crying about this because it's so upsetting to me. Yeah. But yet I've never admitted it out loud. Right. It's only just been something that's lived in my heart. So I don't know. Well, I really appreciate hearing all about what you're doing with Love from Lydia and Cope. And I just want to reach out to all of you. So, one of the big reasons Danielle wanted to be on was to try to kind of expand her net, to be able to have more resources, to be able to offer to people right away. So please, you can go to lovefromlydia.com, right?
Love from Lydia.
Love from Lydia, excuse me. Yeah, lovefromlydia.com and find out more there and reach out there because, she just needs volunteers because the more volunteers you have, then the more of a close fit you're going to hopefully have with someone in those early days and weeks when they might be reaching out.
Exactly. I mean, I try my best to match families with those who have lost children in similar circumstances or similar ages. And like you've talked about on your podcast many times, like I think initially people want to hear about the stories of their peers that is most relatable, that, okay, they were the same age or they had a similar circumstance surrounding their death. And then as time goes on, you realize a lost parent is a lost parent and we are one no matter what, whether you lost your child at 18 or at, 2 months old, it's still the same feeling of losing a child. Of course, there's different things that go into it, right? Like
for sure. But I do agree with you that at first, though, it feels very important to you as a bereaved parent to have it be close. Yes. So that's why I think with this organization, that's why it is so nice because they don't understand that someone who lost their teenager can help you when you lost your toddler.
Right. And I really struggled with that, in the initial groups that I joined because initially I had a group that was local and it was a great group. I loved all the moms in it. And they were so nurturing towards me and they were really helpful to me. But I felt very different because they had all lost older children, either like late teens, early 20s. I mean, I was the age of some of their children that they had lost. Mm-hmm. So I just felt like, in these stories, they were talking about, oh, well, my daughter's children, now I'm taking care of them. And it's like, my daughter didn't even get to go to kindergarten.
Yeah, right.
So it was hard for me to kind of wrap my head around, well, your child reached all these milestones and like mine didn't. And how is that the same or how is that similar? So in that initial aftermath, like you can't make those connections. Yeah. But as you go on, you really realize like the hurt is the same no matter what, like how long.
Yeah. I know I've shared this story before, but it bears sharing again about a dad that I had on who lost their young child. And he was in a support group and it was very similar to what you're talking about. So someone else was in the support group who lost their like 18-year-old daughter. And he thought, well, I had it worse because I only had her for, a couple years and they had her for 18. I mean, and then somebody else was in the group who lost an infant, like days old infant. And it was, well, I've got it worse because I had longer to love my daughter than they had. They had barely even knew them. And then it was like this revelation that came over him that he couldn't have it both ways.
Uh-huh.
You can't have it both ways. Like, I'm worse off because I didn't have forever, and I'm worse off because I had longer. I mean, you turn out, it's all just horrible. So I think, but it takes you getting to that point yourself to realize that.
And I mean, not to event like also bring up David Kessler again, but he says this a lot with like, your grief is the worst grief, right? Like everyone's grief is always the worst because it's what you're experiencing at the moment. And I think that really describes what this man was feeling and what many of us have experienced in our grief journeys.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Well, thank you again so much. And again, the website is Love from Lydia. Love from Lydia. I was going to say it right now. I said it wrong again. lovefromlydia.com. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcy.
Thanks for listening. If you found this helpful and would like to support the podcast, please leave a 5-star rating and comment. To help financially, you can type Andy's Mom, one word, to the number 53555. This provides a link to GiveButter, which allows donations through PayPal, Venmo, Apple Pay, or credit cards. GiveButter will provide a receipt of your tax-deductible donation. Or you can visit the donation page at andysmom.com/donate. Always Andy's Mom is a registered 501c3 and can receive donations through Thrivent Financial and Benevity. Marcy loves hearing from listeners. Please feel free to reach out to her via email at marcy@andysmom.com or on the Instagram or Facebook Always Andy's Mom accounts. Sign up for the email list to get weekly episode links as well as pictures of Marcy's guests and their children. Together, let's work to inspire hope, one day at a time.